Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer on the World Puja Network. This is Dr. Stephen Greer, and I'm joined today with Linda Willits, and we're going to be discussing some of the really beautiful experiences we've had with the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI, over the last few years, and particularly the ones we've had out in Crestone, Colorado, and where we are actually going to be having an expedition out under the stars for a week, starting just here in a couple of weeks. We're going to be there from June 21st to June 27th there with a group of people, and it's open to the public. If you're interested, you can go to cseti.org and look into that to register. So I'd like to thank the people at World Puja Network for hosting us. It's really wonderful that they give us this time to share what's happening with the Orion Project and with CSETI and the Disclosure Project. And we're really wanting to focus right now on the amazing series of contact experiences we've had, because we're launching a program over the next few months that Linda is helping with called Contact Countdown to Transformation. And it's really going to be focusing on the really exciting prospect of interstellar contact with civilizations that we can prove are visiting this planet, and what all that implies for the human future. So thank you, Linda, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
One of the other announcements that we have is that we're going to be having a conference on contact and transformation in Arizona at Rio Rico. It's a beautiful resort area outside of Tucson, Arizona, and we're going to be doing that in October from the 24th to the 26th, and this is going to be a conference where we're going to have a world-renowned crop circle researcher, Colin Andrews, with us, who's going to be sharing his recent experiences with the crop circles and historically an overview, as well as what's been happening with the British government trying to cover up their interest in the subject. And we're going to be having Dr. Ted Loder, as you all know from the Orion Project, talking about the advances in energy and propulsion systems. And we'll be having a presentation by Dr. Lynn Katai, who many of you may know is a medical doctor in Phoenix, who had amazing experiences with the so-called Phoenix Lights, which happened back in 1997, but she's continued to have contact experiences, and so she'll be sharing her experiences there, and then I will be presenting there as well. And each night at this conference in October, we're going to be out under the stars. It's at a beautiful resort facility that has a massive roof terrace that we're going to have darkened, and we're going to have our lasers and electromagnetic sensing devices and all our night scope equipment, and we're going to be there doing sort of a mass contact experiment where we'll be training people in the CSETI protocols of contact, and who knows, maybe another Phoenix Lights type event could happen right over us there in Rio Rico. So if you're interested in joining us for that, information should be up on the website soon.
It is up.
Yeah, and it's as I mentioned, October 24th to 26th, and it's in this really beautiful resort on over 100 acres, about 40 minutes outside of Tucson, Arizona. So that'll be really exciting to do. We've never done anything quite like that, and I think it's going to be a real historic event. So we wanted to give you all that information here at the beginning, just a few program notes. So what we want to talk about, we're getting ready, as I mentioned, to have this expedition out under the stars in Crestone, Colorado, which again is from June 21st until June 27th. And this is in an area, it's called the Mysterious Valley, the San Luis Valley, which is southwest of Colorado Springs on the west side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So Crestone is this very interesting community that has about every spiritual tradition in the world has a retreat center there, including one of the few authentic Tibetan stupas which the Dalai Lama personally asked Ambassador Jim George from Canada to have built there, and he is a big supporter of CSETI and the Disclosure Project. And it's a really magical area, and to the east of where our research site is, out there in this the so-called bloodless valley, because there are no wars that have ever been fought in this beautiful valley in Colorado, are the Sangre de Cristo Mountains that rise up. A whole lot of peaks are well over 14,000 feet. And then to our south are the Great Sand Dunes, which is this massive area of 1,000-foot high or 800-foot high dunes that rise right up out of the valley that we take an expedition into every year as well. And then south ahead is Blanca Peak, which is the third highest peak in Colorado, where we have our contact site, where we've had amazing contact in a clearing in the woods up on Blanca Peak near Zapata Falls. And we're going to be doing this for an entire, about 6 nights out under the stars together. And so you're invited to join us if you have time in the next few weeks to come out there. And we've been going there since 1993, actually, so this will be something like our 17th year there. And some years we've gone more than once. And we actually own some land there, about 8 acres there in the what's called the Baca, which is a huge ranch. And we also have found that over the years that the experiences just keep building and building and building there. And where we do our field work now is in this beautiful sandy clearing that's in the valley. It's very private. And over the last few years, we've just had amazing contact experiences both there and up on Blanca Peak. And so we're going to share some of that just to give people sort of a snapshot of one of the places where we have these sort of expeditions. Crestone is a tradition that we've been doing every year. We also go to Mount Shasta and also Joshua Tree National Park, and we've added in the last couple of years the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where, as you heard last time, we had an enormous craft that flew in, went into the ocean, and then emerged onto the beach as this area of scintillating light, and then a brilliant light that kept flashing with us that was about 90 feet away that we filmed, and it was there for over an hour, and actually signaled to us for at least 100 times we've counted on the video. So these are the kinds of things that keep happening. They're quite mysterious to some folks, but once you understand what we're dealing with, some of these experiences seem less mysterious. I want to set the stage a little bit, first of all, by saying that if it's a interstellar vehicle and not something man-made that's a classified anti-gravity device, they are most of the time operating at resonant frequencies faster than the speed of light. Now, what this means is that any object, even if it's a big spacecraft, if it's in that mode of operation, let's call it, it's not going to be visible as a normal, like a car would be or a 747. There may be like a plasma-like light around it, or a scintillating area of light, what's called neutrino light, that's being emitted from the craft as it's hovering in a field near you. Or it may be something that is fully materialized, as we've had craft that have been completely solid materialized craft, which we actually had one that was photographed by Raven Nabulsi, one of our team members, on this Outer Banks trip last month in May. But what's interesting is that when you're dealing with civilizations that are in the 100,000 to several million years technologically more developed than we are, you would expect virtually every manifestation of their technology to be almost mysterious to us. It'd be sort of like if you and I, those of us listening now who routinely use computers and cell phones and these sort of things, if we were to teleport back in time to the caveman era and show up with those devices, it would be magical to them. And it's a little bit like The Gods Must Be Crazy, that movie where, some native people in Africa see someone throw a Coke bottle out of a little propeller plane, and it becomes this object of great mystery and great wonderment and what have you, and even conflict. And it's a very funny movie, but it has a great message, and that is when you're dealing with civilizations that are hundreds of thousands to perhaps, in some cases, I'm quite convinced, millions of years more developed than we are, their technological, the way that they would manifest technologically and in consciousness is going to appear quite mysterious. And the science of consciousness and how conscious intelligence interfaces with matter in space and time is the key to understanding interstellar technologies. And so this is why so much of what we do a puja. We're on the World Puja Network. We do a puja for everyone at these trainings and expeditions like we're doing in Crestone in a couple of weeks. And we actually teach people meditation and higher states of consciousness and the ability to use consciousness to not only remote view these spacecraft and connect to them, but also to vector them, to set up a dynamic system where we actually show them mentally imagery where we're located, whether it's in Colorado or at the Outer Banks or in England or wherever we are. And there's a specific protocol for that, which we call coherent thought sequencing. It's sort of like putting thought into a coherent field like you would light to make a laser. So it has the same effect. And what's interesting is that interstellar civilizations that go faster than the speed of light, they're not going to be using radio signals or signals like you're picking up for your internet radio show that you're listening to right now. Those are all traveling at the speed of light. And you can't travel from one star system to another, never mind communicate, at such a slow speed, because the speed of light means that if you're 1,000 light years away, which is very close in terms of our cosmic neighborhood, we have 100,000 light years just to go across our own galaxy, the Milky Way, that 1,000 light years away, if you were to try to use a radio signal for that or cell phone signal or something like that from an airplane that we use today, it would take 1,000 years for the signal to be picked up from your home planet to the spacecraft, and another 1,000 years for the reply to get back, which is 2,000 years. And that's a very nearby planetary system, would be 1,000 light years away. So when you look at what we're experiencing with these extraterrestrial vehicles and the kinds of technologies we see, you have to begin to expand your mind into an understanding that their technologies, while they look, in a sense, magical to us now, just like a cell phone would to a caveman, or for that matter, Thomas Jefferson would think a cell phone was magical, the reality is that it makes sense that the expressions of these extraterrestrial civilizations and their technologies are going to be these, in many cases, amazing and incongruous things to most people, but they make complete sense when you begin to go through what I write about, the crossing point of light, the understanding of everything that's resonating beyond the speed of light, and that involves the so-called astral or etheric energies, the subtle energies, thought, consciousness, and actually forms of electromagnetic energy that are nonlinear and that aren't restricted to the speed of light. And this is why they actually have boxes or little devices that look like a machine that interface directly with visualized thought or imagery or a bioelectromagnetic field from a person. And we're going to get into this in a minute. I know it sounds a little bit arcane, but you got to begin to get your mind around the fact that if it is something that's not man-made, it is going to be really extraordinary, oftentimes very beautiful, and rather mysterious in how it manifests and dematerializes and materializes and enters our space-time and disappears out of our space-time, because we're dealing with a trans-dimensional level of technological capability. And it's very, very exciting to explore this. And this is what we do for an entire week under the stars, is that during the afternoons we practice meditation and have instructions in remote viewing and discussing all of these issues. And then at night we're out under the stars actually doing the protocols using high-powered lasers and electromagnetic tones that we send out into space over radio signals so that they can lock on very precisely. But also we do these group meditations where everyone enters into a state of cosmic awareness and then begins to remote view deep space and where these extraterrestrial vehicles are and where these civilizations are. And then we invite them in a spirit of universal peace as ambassadors from Earth to these civilizations and show them very clearly where we're located, whether it be they're in Crestone, Colorado, or wherever we may be. So that's the protocols that we use, and of course it's way beyond radio telescopes and things of this sort, because we're combining multiple modalities at once. And it's really true that, in a sense, we've been able to develop a sort of a Rosetta Stone of communication with these civilizations, because they're clearly way beyond walkie-talkies and the SETI project. That's not CSETI, our organization. It's the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, but the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. That's the SETI program of Frank Drake and Seth Shostak and others. They're listening only in this spectrum of electromagnetic fields, as if every intelligent civilization out there is exactly at our level of evolution, using early 21st century or 20th century radio waves. I mean, this is just a very anthropocentric and misguided approach to this. But so we're trying to expand that paradigm into the sciences of consciousness, mind, thought, and lasers and other things. So we're been having increasing success at this, and it's a very exciting project, because one of the reasons we're opening this up to all these people is that I have been convinced that the more people who step up to being ambassadors from Earth to these civilizations, the more it will create the morphogenic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, in terms of manifesting the sort of the hunter's monkey effect, where it begins to turn the paradigm on this planet. And in fact, this is what we're seeing. I mean, we just recently, in April, had the chief advisors to the head of state of a major G7 country come here to Washington, D.C., and to our farm out here in Virginia for a whole week of meetings to discuss setting up these protocols in this G7 country with the support of their government to make contact. And it's because what we're doing is actually being watched and taken very seriously around the world. And this is why we think that everyone needs to understand that they can become the citizen diplomats to these other interstellar civilizations that are visiting us, because otherwise, who is representing Earth? Well, it certainly isn't the United Nations. They haven't done anything to make open contact, nor has our State Department, nor has the Foreign Ministry of any government that I know of. Because the subject has been kept so secret, it's been relegated to the world of super-secret classified programs run by people who have a xenophobic, fear-driven, war-mongering approach to anything they don't understand and control. And this is why they have completely botched it up and have turned it into something where now we have classified military programs that have advanced space-based weapon systems that are targeting these extraterrestrial vehicles, and have actually downed them on a few occasions. We have witnesses, military witnesses, who have been present when this has happened, that I have spoken to personally, not just one or two, but dozens of them. And so what this means is that it's very important for we, the citizens of Earth and the children of Earth, show another face to these visitors that is a little more enlightened than a sort of militaristic, paranoid, let's kick alien butt, a la the movie Independence Day. And I think this is really what's really important, is that unless we rise up to do it, our leaders won't, and that everything needs to happen at the grassroots first. So this is a grassroots citizens diplomacy effort. It's not just going out and doing a sky watch looking for a UFO. Far from it. It's people stepping into their power in a transformative way to be an ambassador from Earth to the universe and to these visiting civilizations. And when we do it, we have absolutely never had a time where they have not shown up in some way or form. Never.
Right.
And that's what's amazing and beautiful.
Absolutely. You can count on them, and always in an amazing and delightful new way.
Yeah, so I don't know, Linda, if you want to share some of the things that have happened recently while we've been in Crestone, that would be great.
Well, one thing that I'll start with, Dr. Greer says he's been going to Crestone since 1993, and I've been going every year since 1997. And it's only been, it started in 2006 that we used this particular site we call the Sandy site. And it's so unusual because out in this, it's sort of a high deserty grassland kind of area, and there is like this circle of pure beach sand, very close to where we all stay. That's our field site. And the first year we used that site, we found it and started using it in 2006. Now, we'd been going there all those previous years. Everybody's compasses had been normal all those previous years. Suddenly, in 2006, out on the sandy site, people started getting bubbles in their compass, and there can't be an air bubble in a compass without an air leak, and there were no air leaks in everybody's compasses. And this happened. Bubbles happened again in 2007, and I know last year this one guy he did an experiment where he left his compass in his room, which was his hotel room, which was no more than 5 minutes away from this site at the same elevation. It has nothing to do with elevation or anything, something about this site. And so he left it in his room the first night of our field work, and it didn't get a bubble. The second night he brought it out, and at some point during that night he looked at it, and it already had a bubble. And this has continued to happen, but Dr. Greer had this revelation, it was actually last year in 2008, that it was because this particular sandy site that we're doing our field work at is over a giant aquifer, and that there's ETs in that aquifer, and that they're signaling to us that they're there by giving us bubbles in our compass.
Right, and it's interesting because it's one of the largest aquifers in North America that is right underneath that valley, and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and the San Juans drain into this aquifer, and it's very, very near the surface in places. Some areas are almost swampy near there where the water comes right up to the ground level. And we were meditating on this sandy site, and I saw that there were ET craft underneath the earth, in the earth, but in those big aquifers and in the water. And as I began to see that, that's when we had these bubbles. But it's also when in a crystal clear, dry desert Colorado air, water started precipitating out of the sky only right over our circle, and were just like dropping on us like an affirmation. And it happened as I was speaking the word to the group about what I was seeing in the remote viewing underneath the earth. It's also interesting that before we went there, Sherry Adamak and I, when we first went there in 93, had heard that there were a lot of really brilliant, bright white objects that would be seen, and they would look like small lights that would shoot from the earth up into the sky from this area. And in fact, the local people, the farmers, called them, quote, cheap fireworks, but there were no people around. It was just something that was happening. And we've come to realize that, that there's actually a lot of underground extraterrestrial facilities in that area and in Blanca Peak. And we have seen entire craft launch out of Blanca Peak and out of the area of the dunes, or huge orbs. Next, we have one filmed, this huge golden orb spinning at an unimaginable speed, hovering for about 20 minutes that we filmed. I think you filmed it.
Yeah, several of us did.
Yeah, several people did. And these objects that just shoot straight up out of the ground into space, not coming down out of space looking like a falling star, but the opposite. And, of course, we've talked before on this show how what looks like a luminous object that's maybe a few inches across or a foot or two across could actually be a craft that's several thousand feet across, but all you're seeing is the sort of plasma light of it as it moves at a very rapid speed. And as it shifted faster than the speed of light, all the matter of the craft and all the beams in it are shifted transdimensionally more into the astral and etheric level, but you see just this electromagnetic light effect of it. And I think that's what people have been seeing, because it's not just, like New Age people and whatnot who see this. This is every farmer, the Native Americans, it's reported. And so we're sitting in this site, I'm convinced, right over an area where the ETs are not that far down. And we have had, actually, while we've been on the site, noted that when they begin to emerge around us, and you can see this plasma-like scintillating craft all around us, the temperature will go up 10 or 15 degrees. And you can walk 100 feet away from where we're sitting, and it'll be a very, very different temperature. And the same thing with sound effects. We'll be sitting there, and there'll be a sense of being in a domed room. And sometimes my laser light, as I send it up, will be absorbed at the edge of where the dome is of this object. So it's quite mysterious. And, of course, we have had completely materialized craft in the sky and what have you around us. But these sort of things keep happening. And that year that we went to this site the first time, we had this strange effect in everyone's compass where bubbles appeared, a single perfect round bubble, which would then disappear after we would leave the site. It was a very interesting series of electromagnetic effects on this site.
And speaking of still the water motif, remember it was either last year or the year before we had that rushing stream sound that appeared in the southeast, and there's a little brook to kind of the northeast, but you can't actually hear it from this site. Normally it's very silent. We heard this it sounded like there was a huge river really close by with the rushing water sound coming out of the southeast, and it lasted for about 20 minutes, and then it disappeared, and that was when we were having an interaction with the craft around us.
Yeah, these are near some townhouses where many of us stay when we're there. And one year, Linda and Dr. Loder and I were sitting outside, and you've often heard me talk about this beautiful sort of cobalt blue or blue-white craft that has flown in on virtually every one of these expeditions since 1998, over the last 11 years. And this came in over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to our northeast, and very low in the sky, and it was this ship that I call his Kindness' ship, because the day that Sherry Adamek passed away, I had a lucid, astral, out-of-body sort of dream where Sherry introduced me to this extraterrestrial senior ambassador who had a very perfectly round head, beautiful eyes, no hair, and she sort of manifested like an avatar of perfect kindness and compassion, so I call her Kindness. And it was very clear that she'd be connected to our work. And interestingly, after that, we started having this beautiful craft that would come out of the sky, often make sort of a arc or a semicircle loop, and then zip right back out into space. Well, this one time when we were sitting at Crestone, it came in so low over the Sangre de Cristo and came right, and then a light came out of it that actually shone on our little circle, and it lit up the whole area. It was so bright it lit
brilliant.
up just for a moment.
She was really close, and that was in 2000, and we were discussing the preparations for the disclosure event that took place in 2000. That's when we kind of set it in 2001. We set it into motion, and so I think she was acknowledging that.
Right.
That year.
Right. And in fact, I'd had a communication with her when I had asked, should we do this Disclosure Project event and launch all this information out to the world with all of these top secret military witnesses and documents and all this. And she had said, if you can do it, do it. It's really time. And so this was when we were having a little planning meeting discussing it out under the stars in Crestone, and she flew in as if to give an affirmation. So it's very interactive with what this project is. This is what people have to understand. It isn't as if these are inanimate objects flying across the sky like a satellite it's very interactive with what we're doing, with what we're thinking, with what the group coherence is of the group. And that's why we limit the groups to usually 30 or 40 people or so. And it's really beautiful to see that when something is being planned, like the Disclosure Project, we have these sort of really strong, full materializations of these craft. And we actually have some of these filmed, beautiful, where they're flying in. And you can see this brilliant craft that flies in and makes a turn and then zips right back out into space. I'm sure for security reasons, because one of the sad things about the current situation in the world is that there's a classified project that tracks these objects, and I have people on my team who are very classified military and intelligence folks who have told me about these tracking systems, and unfortunately we also have weapon systems that target them. So there is a risk, of course, when one of these objects becomes fully materialized in space-time, it comes out of the transdimensional aspect beyond the veil of the speed of light and fully materializing. And that's why I think sometimes those events can be rather quick. But at times they've lasted much longer. I think maybe someone's asleep at the switch or they're doing something to where it seems safe. But one of the things that we always communicate to these visitors is that whatever they do, it should be safe and appropriate for wherever we are and for the time. And we don't want anyone to take any unnecessary risks. But what we do see is that one way or another they appear, and they appear in ways that are sometimes just breathtaking, like some of these events that we've had happen in Crestone, Colorado.
Another really important thing that happened that same night of the meditation about the aquifer, and we have the really delicate little raindrops. As soon as you finish that meditation, that's when the huge triangular craft flew over us for the first time since 2000, when we saw it in Pine Bush, New York, which was right after the first time it appeared in Mount Shasta in September of '99.
That's correct, and it was this massive triangle.
So it was the first time in like 8 years or 7 years that we'd seen it.
Right.
Or 8 years that we'd seen it, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it was, and it was just at this particular place in the meditation again. What we find is that we do a meditation where we do train people to remote view in consciousness. We do the contact protocols to show them where we are, but then we do this sort of meditation and prayer for world peace and for the healing of the earth. And often in the middle of that process is when they show up, when everyone gets into a pure-hearted place and in a clear place in their heart and mind. That's when these ET craft show up and amazing things happen. I know that almost invariably it's around that time that we have these sort of experiences. And I think that's another part of the message is that, we're dealing with civilizations that, once you reach the ability to travel faster than the speed of light, there's nothing in the material cosmos you need because you can manifest whatever you need. We're even at the point now where I know physicists who have worked at Harvard and other places that have done work where there's been literally transmutation of the elements, where things have been created using high powerful magnetic fields. And so when you're dealing with technologies that are hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years more developed than what we have, there's sort of the paranoid view of quote aliens invading us because there's something here they need. This is just silly, because if you have the ability to travel interstellar, transdimensional technologies, there's nothing on this planet they need. The only thing they really need from us is peace, because now we're becoming a spacefaring civilization with weapons of mass destruction. And what they really need from the Earth is that the children of the Earth need to live together in peace together, and then we're going to be able to be welcomed with open arms by the cosmos.
And Crestone is one of the places where we feel a real emotion from the ETs. We do everywhere, but to me, Crestone, we feel more love and support coming from the ETs in Crestone than any other place, and especially at that contact site, where you have received so much support from Kindness and the other ET elders and the avatars when you've gone into that contact site.
Yeah, she's referring, there's a place up on Blanca Peak that we actually remote viewed the first time we ever went up there in 1997. And we were doing an exercise in the afternoon at our meeting place at a little lodge there in Crestone. And I was asking people, where should we be tonight? And everyone started remote viewing and getting certain coordinates and numbers on a map and started getting a name. And it turned out it was Zapata Falls. And there's a parking area up on Blanca Peak where you can walk to these beautiful little waterfalls called Zapata Falls. And so that we went there, and that's how we ended up there that first time. And it was all guided in consciousness. And there was a place that I had remote viewed up from where the parking area is that was off to the right as you're going up to the falls, that would be where we would have contact. And the very first night we were there, it was an unbelievable electrical storm like you've almost never seen in your life. And so everyone had to get in their vehicles, and it lasted for an hour or two. I mean, it was just amazing storm, lightning strikes everywhere. During the storms, while we were in the vehicles, you could actually see in some of the clearing in the clouds with the backlit with the lightning, disc-shaped and triangular-shaped craft flying in and out of the peak. And many people saw this. It was quite astonishing. After the storm, we got out, and the whole area was sort of scintillating. It's like if you know in the South you have fireflies or lightning bugs, as they're called. But there in Colorado there are no such things. But it was like finer than that. But it was every single person could see all this sparkling, scintillating celestial energy because we'd all been sitting, meditating, inviting them there. And so after a while, I went up to find this spot, Sherry Adamek, and I walked up the path. And then I came back and gathered everyone, and we went up there. And when we did, I walked into an area, and a brilliant light burst right above me, to the right and slightly above me. And I walked into this sort of column of light. And I then saw that I was in a sort of trans-dimensional space, and there were about a dozen elders or representatives from various extraterrestrial civilizations there, as well as celestial beings and sort of representation of the Godhead. It was this whole celestial thing happening. But the ETs that were there were quite obvious. And as I walked forward, a lot of people, I had a big ski jacket on because it's cold up there. I mean, we were at 9,000 feet. Even in July or June, it's still cold at that elevation at night. And as I walked up into this area and greeted each of these beings, I was about to levitate, and I felt the energy rising around me to such an extent, the vibration and resonance, that I thought I was going to vanish, and I really had to hold on to staying in the linear space-time level of things. And other people saw me disappearing or fading out. I mean,
you were definitely, your edges were becoming indistinct, and it was like you were going to fade out. That's what I saw, and a number of people did see that same thing.
Yeah, and so I became so almost translucent where people could see through me or my edges vanished. And during all of this, what was really interesting is that the ETs were asking us to work in service for universal peace and to work on all of this together. And it was just a really sacred sort of event. A day or two later, I took out the compass that I have, and we actually have this photograph that's going to be in the next book. There's going to be a DVD with the next book that's going to show all these pictures of things that have happened, as well as craft and beings and everything. And it was a regular compass with, a magnetic needle in it. And when I took it out, it was north had been shifted about 120 to 160 degrees off of north. And in other words, it had been demagnetized so that the magnetic north part of the compass was altered. And it was over my heart chakra in the breast pocket of my coat the whole time during this amazing contact event up on Blanca Peak there outside of Crestone. And I came to realize that this was proof of what had happened, and it actually stayed that way for about a month.
It did, because the picture I took of it was in England a month later.
Right, and
then it went
it
back.
Eventually went back to normal, quote-unquote normal, which means that the north part of the needle was facing north. But it actually had that kind of magnetic field alteration on this compass for that long. Yeah. That's how strong this event was. It's quite amazing. And it's very reminiscent of other things we've had, where we had a craft fully materialize in a field in England in the 90s, 92, I believe it was, and at Alton Barnes near some crop circles. And the compass I was holding started turning counterclockwise, just like the craft was, with the needle, instead of pointing north, started slowly shifting, and eventually went 360 degrees all the way around the dial, but not spinning quickly, very slowly, just moving while this craft was around us. And, it's really interesting because there is a magnetic field flux disturbance when these craft or their energies are around, and this is why actually at the Lockheed Skunk Works and in the aerospace industry, the man-made anti-gravity devices that we've been building since the 50s that use all these new energy systems that we are hoping the world will benefit from soon, to get us off of oil, among other things, are called flux liners. One of the terms that are used are magnetic flux liners, because they're actually moving along the magnetic flux field is part of where they're drawing their energy. And there is a big magnetic flux field disturbance when you're near them. And we used to have some magnetometers that measure the magnetic field of either the Earth, but also of like a lightning strike or even a man-made object. And those magnetometers, which eventually broke, and we haven't found a good source for replacing them yet. If anyone listening knows where you get a good portable battery-operated magnetometer, let me know. But they used to go off whenever we would have an ET being or a craft that was approaching or around us. And so now we use other kinds of detectors, radar detectors and laser detectors and other things. But it's interesting because this contact event was the beginning of this kind of long journey up on Blanca Peak and in Crestone that continues to this year. So it's very exciting. I hope some of you can join us there, if not this year, in future years.
You know, every single time we go up there, it's absolutely magical. And it has a real sacredness about it. And what's so interesting is we don't use our flashlights, and often there's no moon, and so it's pitch dark when we walk up there. But the path to this contact site, and the contact site is basically kind of round. The periphery is lined with rocks that happen to be white and kind of glow at night, and so you can find your way up there by the white rocks in the path, and then it has just this really sacred feel about it, and amazing things happen every single time. Like last year when you went up there, typically the group of us follows behind Dr. Greer, and then we stop, and he goes ahead and has communication with these advanced beings, and we see things going on around him, and also there are ETs, small astral ETs and large ones, all sizes of ETs that are among us and that are in between where we are and where he is. But what I saw last year is he walked through like an arch of sparkles that were sparkling so wildly that they reminded me of fireworks. And I didn't even think about it until as we were leaving the site that it was the 4th of July. It was like maybe 1 a.m. On the 4th of July when we were up there. And so we have these fireworks. And then I mentioned that as we were driving out, and then your odometer on your rental vehicle turned 1776. And that was there's all these synchronicities that happen.
Yeah, weird synchronicities. And also, interestingly, last year is when our webmaster for the OrionProject.org, the Energy Project, was with us up on this site at Blanca Peak. And we had the Big Dipper right kind of above us. And it was, we were in the meditation, and he had the thought, it would be so interesting if the ETs could do something where they could turn off the bright stars in the Big Dipper one by one or a few at a time to signal with us. And suddenly they started doing that. I mean, a cloudless, crystal clear, we're up at 9,000 feet in the Rockies, and here is the Big Dipper with, how it's shaped with the handle and then the bowl of the dipper with the 4 stars. At different points, various stars would be occluded, like they'd be turning on and off. But we had night scopes up there that magnify ambient starlight like 32,000 times or something like that. And there were no clouds, there were no objects there. So they were some kind of energy field absorbing the light, but only, discreetly, because there would be little stars out in space further and right next to the ones going out that wouldn't be occluded.
Right.
So it was quite mysterious, and this went on for about 23 minutes.
And it was interactive, too, because when we commented on it, and they would keep going out. We'd go, there's another one that went out, and then it would come on and another one would go out. And then at one point, I remember we made the comment, look, all the stars are on again, and then they went out. So they were interacting with our comments, clearly.
And every single person saw this, and of course, it really is exciting when we see these, fully materialized craft and things that happen. But these other kinds of events, which are very interactive, and they're interacting with the group, but they're also interacting with the intent of one or more people in the group, they're mysterious, but they're very beautiful and subtle, and in a sense more interesting and profound than kicking the tires on a flying saucer, quote unquote, which is what most people, sort of visualize. And I'm going, oh, it's so beyond that, and so much more actually intriguing and interesting and beautiful. So there's a million different ways that we've had these visitors appear, and sort of expressions of how they manifest in our space-time are virtually endless. And whether it be these tones that we had come through at Joshua Tree in November, or this object on the beach that was there signaling for an hour over 100 times at Outer Banks last month, or these sort of events, it almost never ends. And there are certain things that happen consistently from year to year, but it seems like every single one of these expeditions, there's something new they add to the repertoire of sort of manifestations of intelligence and extraterrestrial technology that teach us something new. It's like a cosmic school that we're all in. And it's like a tutorial from the cosmos and from these very advanced interstellar civilizations where we're learning everything like this. And it's happening over and over and over again. So it's not like you go to a seminar and workshop and everyone's sitting like a blob. Everyone is part of this, and everyone's becoming an ambassador to these visitors. And it's a very interactive and dynamic process, which is surprising to people, because most people just go to workshops and seminars and they sit and they listen. This is not that. I mean, there is some of that. There is the instruction part of it, but the big part of it is what's going on that's in real time, very interactive with these visitors. That happens in 1,000 different ways. Well, I mean, you may want to tell them about that event where the people from the White Eagle Lodge saw the craft.
Yeah. Yeah, offhand I don't remember what year this was. It was a few years ago, but there's this lodge called the White Eagle where a lot of members of our group stay, and then at that time our field site was south and maybe slightly east of that, several miles, and in between that distance, you typically could not see our field site from the White Eagle because there was a farm and a house that would be right in the direct path of your line of vision. Well, this one particular night, it was, again, we had an electrical storm out at our field site, and we got out of our vehicles when it ended, and we made our circle, and we were in a craft, and again, often after an electrical storm, the air is so clear that you see more things than you would ordinarily. And so we could see the sparkling lights of this craft that we were in, and the cook at the White Eagle and another guy happened to step outside for a smoking break about this.
Well, before you get to that, let me what we were experiencing at this site is that we became aware that, first of all, there was this very clear plasma-like scintillating craft that emerged all around us.
Right.
And several people saw very fast-moving red and white lights going around counterclockwise around us as if we were in this sort of trans-dimensional craft. And then there were these sort of beams, these scintillating beams that were moving around. And people had been touched, and all kinds of things were going on.
Sparkling.
And it was this big domed, large, I mean, this is not like a 20-foot, this is hundreds of feet across, large object. And you could sense it, and the air was thick with it, and you could actually see these scintillating lights. And I saw it, and several other people saw this red and white sort of light area going around the circle, kind of outlining the diameter and dimensions of this trans-dimensional craft. And then, what you were getting ready to tell.
Yeah, the cook and this other guy stepped out for a smoking break and happened to just glance in that direction. And they saw this huge golden craft with a white and red light going around the periphery, as lights often do on saucer-shaped crafts. And it was so distinct to them. And what was amazing is it was like that farmhouse and barn buildings had disappeared, and they were able to see straight through it as though those buildings weren't there, and see the craft, which they described the next day as being exactly out where we were. And they told us about it the next day. They were really actually kind of freaked out by it, but it was beautiful. But
it was beautiful, but it was an interesting response from them because they were terrified. And we learned later that the following week they left the area never to return. And, it's funny how people have these irrational fear reactions to this. But the other interesting part of what they saw, which we were experiencing was we were in the center of this thing, is that they saw that when the lightning that had moved off to the southeast would flare, they would see the whole outline of the shape of this enormous ship with this light going around it. And they didn't know, these people who were working there were not into this stuff in the least. And they didn't know that we had had that experience that night. It was only the next day that they ran into someone on our team at this hotel, at this lodge, and they started talking about what they saw, and they described precisely what we had experienced.
Right.
And, it was really quite remarkable. And those are the kinds of things that, of course, I guess to someone who's not really trained in how bizarre perhaps this can seem to some folks, they were a little freaked out, but and unhinged by it all. But because these were really just, sort of blue-collar worker, they're smoking, taking a smoking break, and they see this whole event taking place, and they're going, holy Christ, what is this? And and it was not subtle. I mean, this was something that was quite large and visible to not just one, it was a couple of them that were out there looking at this. And then, of course, they came and explained this to our group in the afternoon session.
Yeah,
and when we told them what we were experiencing, they were just like stunned because it was very confirming to them.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of things that happen, from one year to the next. And it's really quite exciting, and that's why we continue to return to this really magical area. And Blanca Peak, by the way, which we've been talking about where our contact site is referred to as the Sacred Mountain of the East for the tribes of the western states. It's where they would gather, and it's considered one of the real sacred peaks out west. And as, of course, the San Luis Valley is the bloodless valley because they would gather there for peace meetings, but they would never fight in that valley. So it's a really quite an amazing area, very beautiful history to it that predates, the pre-Columbian era. So I think that that's a great experience. And those of you who want to join us again, we're going to be there from June 21st to 27th, and at cseti.org you can find out information about how to become part of that. It is open to people who are interested. And one of the things I want to comment on, sort of a meta theme that I keep touching on, and that is the power of group awareness. And many of you may know the work of Dr. John at Princeton, the Peer Lab there, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. And he found that if you were using consciousness to affect a mechanical system, for example, or a random number generator or some other robot or what have you, that if one person put their awareness on making a change happen, make a robot move in a certain direction or what have you that would ordinarily move randomly, it would have an effect because the conscious mind does affect time and space and matter. But that if two people who loved each other or were united did it, it was an exponential increase. What we're doing is with 30, 40 people, and we're doing this in a higher state of consciousness with deep meditation. We do a puja where we bring in the knowledge of all the ancient teachers going back through the lineage, through the Vedas and way beyond, and the interstellar consciousness. And when people are in that awareness doing this kind of work under the stars together, it has a huge effect in the world because we're actually visualizing the world transforming from its current state, getting onto this path of hundreds of thousands of years of peace and the evolution of a civilization using non-harmful technologies to live in abundance on this planet, but also where we are evolving in consciousness so that we can become interstellar beings. And it has a huge effect to have 30 or 40 people in that state of coherence and unity doing it. And this is why this event that we're going to be doing, it's the first time we've ever done it, in Arizona outside Tucson from October 24th to 26th, is really about contact and the countdown to transformation, where our civilization is going to be exponentially transforming onto this path. And, we hope to have, 200 or 300 people or more at this in meditation together for 3 nights out under the stars. And those of you who can make it, it's actually drivable from Southern California and Las Vegas and, of course, Phoenix and Tucson and that whole area of the Southwest. And it's a beautiful retreat center, actually, beautiful luxury and lovely, but it's very isolated. And a member of our team went there a couple weeks ago and said it was just amazing that on the very top of the buildings is this enormous roof terrace that we'll be able to all sit out under the stars and have our lasers and do the whole protocols that we've been doing. So that's going to be really exciting. So that people who can't make, a whole week somewhere can come to this, which will be really fun.
It'll be amazing, and the air there is crystal clear. It's there's not much development around, so there are very few lights. And on this roof terrace where we'll be above the lights as well. So it'll be dark. It'll be beautiful. The stars will be incredible.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, a lot of people don't realize, everyone hears about the Phoenix lights, but in reality, that big craft was seen down in Tucson, outside Tucson, which is where we're going to be. Uh-huh. And Dr. Fatai will be, presenting a lot of this. But it was actually seen all the way from down near the Mexican border and down around Tucson, all the way up to Phoenix, but north of Phoenix.
It started north of Phoenix. I was just talking to her the other day, but it continued south as it left the Phoenix area.
Right.
So we'll be in that area where that craft was, part
right.
of the area.
And it's interesting that Governor Fife Symington, who ridiculed all this at the time, is now the former governor of Arizona, has come out publicly saying, yes, he in fact saw this. And a lot of people don't realize that was a CE5. I was there when that happened. And the backstory to the Phoenix Lights, which we don't talk about very often, but hey, this is the World Puja Network, we can talk about anything, is that I was flying in on a U.S. Airways flight to meet with a picture editor from the BBC and Sherry at a digital laboratory in Tempe, which is right there in the Phoenix area. And as we were on our final approach to Phoenix Airport, I started this meditation where I did the whole remote view connected to the ET visitors, and I asked them to do something very dispositive, very definitive, because we were gathering with all the best photographs and videotapes of ET craft and UFOs that we've collected from all over the world, and we were going to put it into a master best available evidence video disc to give to all the members of Congress and people we were meeting with a couple weeks later in April of 97. So this was on March 13th of 97. And that I landed at about 5:30 in the evening, and by 8:30 this event was happening. And it was literally on the news, all over the news that night in Phoenix. And we got the videotape of it, and we put it in this reel, in this summary of photographic and video evidence to give to members of Congress in April of 97 when we held our briefings for Congress, as well as some people from the White House and the Vice President's office and the Department of Defense who were interested. So what we found was that, although this has not been talked about publicly, the entire Phoenix Lights events was a close encounter of the fifth kind, which is a term that we use for when humans make contact with the visitors for diplomatic purposes. But in this case, I was asking for something very dispositive and very undeniable to happen because we were just in this final stretch of putting together all this evidence for Congress, and this is what the result was. And, of course, you could always say that's a coincidence, but I don't think it was, and in fact, I know it wasn't.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So those are some of the things we have happen. And again, I'd like to invite those of you who can to join us in Crestone, Colorado this year. And we'll also be at Mount Shasta doing our expedition from August 23rd to the 29th. And and also at Joshua Tree National Park from November 15th to the 21st. So, but this big gathering, it's going to be sort of a celebration and extravaganza of music and light, and Colin Andrews crop circles, and Dr. Katai and Dr. Loader and myself presenting at this conference in Rio Rico outside Tucson from October 24th to the 26th. That's all the information is at cseti.org, at cseti.org, and hope to see all of you there. And we also have upcoming talks in Charlottesville, Virginia on July 10th, and a workshop, and then in San Rafael, California on August 21st, we're going to do a presentation and then a workshop out under the stars on August 30th. And then in Asheville, North Carolina, those of you in that area will be there on September 11th, and doing a workshop on the September 12th. And then in Costa Mesa in Southern California, we'll be doing a lecture on November 13th, and then a workshop on Saturday the 14th. So all those things are up there on the website, and hope you can join us, and it'd be good to say hi to some of the folks at the World Puja Network. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and I'd like to thank the World Puja Network for hosting conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and thank you, Linda, for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.